Well, welcome to the 700 Club. Against all odds, Benjamin Netanyahu came from behind to win a stunning victory yesterday. Now, after 3 elections in under a year, the political stalemate in Israel could be almost over. The question is, can Israeli Prime Minister put together a winning coalition? John Wagi has this look from Tel Aviv.
Jubilation at Likud party headquarters after the most skilled campaigner in Israel's history came from behind once again.
It's a win against all odds because we stood up against the powerful forces. They already eulogized us. Our enemies said the Netanyahu era is over, but we turned the plate on its head.
Likud's victory puts the prime minister right on the edge of a governing majority. He was in the same position last year and failed. But the people celebrating here tonight believe this time he won't be denied.
Exit polls gave the parties on the right at least 59 seats, just short of the 61 needed to end the Knesset logjam. But the full vote count could take days, and that makes for some anxious moments.
We're hoping it's going to be 61, and then we don't need anybody, and whoever wants to come is welcome, and whoever doesn't, we can still manage a government.
Still, Netanyahu's rival, blue and white leader Benny Gantz, refused to concede.
We created something called Blue and White. We merged our documents and principles to one place, and I am telling you that we won't compromise on our principles and our way.
In past campaigns, Likud counted on former Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman as a solid part of the right-wing bloc. But he started the election stalemate last year and says he won't compromise now.
We don't plan to move 1 millimeter from what we promised, from what we committed to our voters.
Even if Gantz and Lieberman won't compromise, the Likud camp believes in coming days they can find Knesset members from the left or the center to join them and save Israelis from a 4th election. John Wagi, CBN News, Likud headquarters, Tel Aviv.
Well, CBN Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell is joining us now from Jerusalem to tell us what lies ahead. Chris, Netanyahu has, what, 59 seats, 60 seats? He needs 61. Well, what do you think he's got to do?
Well, right now, Pat, he's got a couple of options. First of all, that's the question of the hour right here. One thing, the final vote hasn't come in. Right now, there's about 90% of the vote. The final vote will come in by Thursday. They still need to count soldiers and diplomats and even people that were quarantined from the coronavirus. So that will be one way they can get it. If they get 61 seats, they can have a government unobstructed. As John referred to in his report, right now they're actually in talks with some of these candidates, these members of parliament from the Blue and White Party. If they can get just a couple of them to defect, come over to the to Likud and to Netanyahu's government, they could form a government. And Pat, one other point, there's tremendous public pressure right now not to have a 4th election, so that's going to be in Netanyahu's favor as well.
Well, the turnout from the Israelis is astounding. How many people, the percentage of people who voted in this election?
That's right. There was more voters since 1999, about over 70% of the population. And right now, Pat, you know, a lot of people are calling Netanyahu like a political magician. He's pulled a political rabbit out of his hat. And how did he do it? He did it because he had a positive campaign. He was able to bring and target maybe 300,000 Likud voters that weren't in the last September's election. They were able to target them, and he went out there. He was a tireless campaigner. He was able to do 5 and 6 rallies at a day, and because of all that, they were able to make that switch. Back in September, they were 4 or 5 seats down. Now they're 4 or 5 seats up. Makes a huge difference. And he might be on the precipice of forming a government for the first time, Pat, in over a year.
Have you identified a couple of those blue and white folks who might be, I hate to use the term defector, but would come over and help form a government?
Well, there's one they talk about in the Labor Party right now. There's 4 or 5 in the blue and white they're actually talking to. Many of those people aren't coming out publicly, and those Likud members that are in discussions with them, they're not saying who they're talking to. But like I said, Pat, there's really a pressure in the Israeli public not to go to a fourth election. So they're saying that those people, if they come over to Likud, they won't be seen as traitors. Right now, at least publicly, Blue and White is saying they're going to stick together. But, Pat, you know, they have formed their government as three political parties for anybody but Bibi, and that didn't seem to work with Israeli voters.
What about this indictment thing? It's kind of specious that he had a deal with Bizek to get favorable publicity, and this was a indictable offense. I mean, what is the story behind all that?
Well, right now, that's the huge question overlooming right now. The final vote tally is on March 17th. He goes to trial. I talked to a legal expert earlier today who said, first of all, he can ask, like any defendant, that the trial would be delayed. But it also could be a constitutional crisis, because right now there was a motion filed in the Supreme Court to stop Netanyahu from forming a government. That, for technical reasons, that motion was delayed. But now that he is prime minister, the motion is that a prime minister cannot form a government if he's indicted. We'll see what happens on that. That's the next big hurdle that he needs to file. But Pat, in the last several months, he really has been a political magician that faced all sorts of obstacles, and right now he could be on the verge of forming that new government. Well,
Chris, in my opinion, the Israeli people understand the challenges they're facing from Iran and from other sources, and they want a strong leader who will carry them through those crises. Am I reading too much into that?
Not at all, Pat. I think most people here, well, a majority, not everybody, obviously, but they really see Netanyahu. For 10 years, he's led through security challenges, economic challenges, diplomatic successes. Many people see him as the man that can really lead Israel into the future and qualified as the best prime minister. So you're reading that just right, Pat.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for your insights. Well, in other news, the field of Democrats is shrinking, and Joe Biden is reaping the rewards. The question remains, will Democrat voters unite behind Biden today? George Thomas has that story.
That's exactly right, Pat. Today is Super Tuesday, the biggest day so far in the 2020 Democratic presidential race. Virginians coming out to the polls early this morning. Voters in 14 states will cast their ballots. About 1/3 of total delegates are at stake. As Abigail Robertson explains, Democratic voters have fewer choices today than they did just 24 hours ago.
As voters head to the polls, Joe Biden picked up some major endorsements ahead of today, hoping to rally more moderate Democrats around defeating Democratic Socialist Bernie Sanders in the primary.
We can win big or lose big. That's the choice that's upon us now.
Senator Amy Klobuchar and Mayor Pete Buttigieg ended their campaigns before Super Tuesday, and both announced they would back Biden.
I'm encouraging everybody who was part of my campaign to join me, because we have found that leader in Vice President, soon to be President, Joe Biden.
Even with the boost, Bernie Sanders still leads the polls in delegate-rich Texas and California. So the question remains whether Biden can catch him.
We are going to defeat the most dangerous president in the modern history of America.
Billionaire Mike Bloomberg ignored early voting states, hoping to make a splash on Super Tuesday with his ballot debut.
I honestly think that Mike Bloomberg is a bit maybe out of his depth and got excited about running for president because he had the resources to do it and certainly some experience, but I don't think that he's going to be particularly successful.
President Trump is also on the campaign trail, bringing in massive crowds around the country, with people camping out for days ahead of his rallies.
Drain that swamp! Drain that swamp! Drain that swamp! Drain that swamp!
I'm the first person in line, yes.
When did you get here?
I got here about 1:45 midnight Thursday night.
Sharon's been on the Trump train since day one and tells CBN News this is the 7th time she's been first in line for one of his rallies.
I love the job he's doing, and I love to listen to him explain what he's doing and explain his plans for the future.
With more than 1/3 of the total delegates being awarded by the end of today, the Democratic Party will soon have a clearer picture of who might be taking on Trump in 2020. Reporting from Charlotte, North Carolina, Abigail Robertson, CBN News.
Thank you, Abigail. Pat, what do you think? Obviously, Joe Biden got 2 big boosts yesterday. Will it help him?
I think he's going to be the man, George. I believe, I've said before, I think Buttigieg is playing to be vice president, and you're going to have a B&B ticket. It'll be Biden and Buttigieg. I don't think it's going to be Sanders. I think they're scared to death of Sanders, that they'll lose down ballot, I should say, candidates, that they'll lose the House and they'll lose the Senate, and it'll be a disaster for the Democrats. And so somewhere along the way, they're going to unite against him. But I was listening to Frank Lotz, who's a terrific pollster, and he says the young people like Sanders because they think he's authentic. Well, they say the same thing about Trump. They think he's authentic because he just speaks his mind and tweets out all this stuff that everybody's scared to death of, but the voters seem to like it. So I don't think Sanders, they will unite against Sanders sooner or later. Well, there was a tragedy that took place in Nashville, and George has that story.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Pat. Sad news to report from that state. At least 9 people are dead and dozens of buildings destroyed after tornadoes touched down near Nashville. The twisters ripped through the area early morning. People waking up to extreme damage in the Nashville area. At least 40 buildings collapsed and several neighborhoods were hit. There are reports of roofs ripped off, gas leaks and power outages. Search and rescue teams are moving through the devastated areas looking for survivors. More storms are expected through the south this afternoon. Now to the coronavirus, which is continuing to spread in America. Health officials confirming more than 100 cases in 15 states. The latest in Georgia, where officials announced 2 new cases. Worldwide, more than 90,000 people have been infected and 3,100 have died from the virus. At least 70 countries have been affected. In Italy, coronaviruses there spiked, leading Delta and American Airlines to suspend all flights to Milan. Back in the U.S., in Washington State, outside Seattle, at least 6 deaths and more cases expected. Research suggesting that the virus could have been spreading in the community for weeks.
The risk for all of us of becoming infected will be increasing.
Meanwhile, Vice President Mike Pence says a possible vaccine could be making its way to clinical trials within the next 6 weeks. President Donald Trump says he's urging drug companies to speed up the process of creating a coronavirus. A bit of positive news to report. The stock market showing signs of recovery. The Dow up 5% on a 1,300-point surge Monday. The S&P 500 and NASDAQ also rallied, this after massive losses last week on news of the coronavirus spread. Pat has more with our CBN medical reporter, Laurie Johnson.
Thanks very much. I'm sure that the market was watching our show with Laurie, who told them the way to keep themselves healthy. CBN health reporter Laurie Johnson is with us with more.
The White House Coronavirus Task Force expanded to include the federal employee in charge of nursing home safety. Also yesterday, President Trump met with representatives of pharmaceutical companies to speed up vaccines and treatments. We're told that a vaccine will be available to the general public in about a year, and treatments to make people better will be available on a wide-scale basis by the end of the summer. And 1 million coronavirus test kits will be available nationwide by the end of this week.
Laurie, I'm sure people were watching our program about the gut flora. We had about 8,000 requests for that book on how to give a better gut. But what do you think the real risk to Americans has been? Am I saying that it's been overblown? I know that the stuff is spreading, but isn't this overblown?
Well, Pat, the Centers for Disease Control updated its risk assessment, and they say nationwide to the general public, the risk remains low. However, in communities where there is community spread, they say that the risk is elevated to relatively low, and that the risk is elevated for healthcare workers treating people with the coronavirus, people who have close contact with people who have the coronavirus, such as family members, and people who are returning from countries where there is a coronavirus outbreak.
Thank you. And I understand you've done a news alert. You've got it written down about what Americans should think about the coronavirus. You want to tell us about that?
It's a coronavirus fact sheet, and we have compiled information provided to us from the leading experts on this issue, experts in infectious disease and public health, and we're making it available to our viewers so they can understand the truth and fiction regarding the coronavirus outbreak. And of course, we are going to keep people updated as this situation develops.
Thanks, Laurie. Ladies and gentlemen, here it is. It's a news alert, coronavirus, what do you need to know? We'll give this fact sheet to you free of charge. It's 2 pages. I mean, it's 2 sides of 1 page. And we'll give that to you. And also, we've had about at least 8,000 requests for this little book we call Build a Better Gut. And as Laurie pointed out in our show yesterday, 80% of our immune system is in the gut flora, and if that thing is working, the chances of you suffering any major impact from the coronavirus is very slim, because you will have a strong immune system. And if you stay away from sugar, stay away from trans fats, stay away from white flour and all those things that cause inflammation, and you build a better gut with this little booklet that tells you how to get it, you will not have to worry about you or your family in relation to coronavirus. I'm not saying that it might not affect you, but it'll be no worse than a case of the sniffles. So we'll give this to you free, Build a Better Gut, or the fact sheet on what you need to know. All you have to do is give us a call, 1-800-700-7000. Absolutely no money involved. We're not talking about anything you have to pay for. It's all free. 1-800-700-7000. Okay.
Well, you can also text us for the coronavirus fact sheet. If you'd like to do that, just text coronavirus to 41444. That's 41444. We'll be happy to get it out to you.